From Transistors to Neurons, a late integration of pattern recognition, stroke, and a lifetime of systems thinking. Number 1479, VPT#040, December 25, 2025. Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation. Category: Pattern Recognition, Stroke Recovery, Multidisciplinary Research. Introduction. When I was 25, a psychologist at MIT shared a test result that would take me decades to truly understand. She explained that while my IQ of 160 placed me in the genius range, roughly 1 in 30,000 people, my ability to recognize patterns was an extreme outlier, closer to 1 in a million. At that time, I accepted the result politely, but it did not influence how I lived or worked. I simply moved forward. Over time, that ability quietly became the engine of my career. It allowed me to invent several breakthrough technologies, and provided the strategic foresight that later led me to become the top-ranked CEO on NASDAQ in 1995. I was not merely processing data, I was seeing patterns in system architecture before they fully emerged, yet I still did not fully understand what the psychologist meant. Over the next 5 decades, I built companies, survived failures, and later endured serious diseases. I studied physics, mathematics, engineering, economics, marketing, business management, and psychology. I experienced both enterprise success and 6 startup failures, and faced 9 life-threatening mortality events. Only much later did I begin to understand what pattern recognition at such an extreme level truly meant. On June 21, 2025, after suffering my first stroke and reflecting on 16 years of self-studied medicine and biomedical research conducted without institutions, professors, classmates, colleagues, or patients, those statements finally made sense to me. The meaning did not arrive as a sudden intellectual insight, it arrived as recognition. I realized that what I had been doing throughout my life was recognizing patterns, including structure, direction, and consequence, across complex systems long before formal proof or calculation. This ability also extended to human thinking and behavior, especially during the years when I led thousands of smart, capable, and highly educated engineers from the world's top engineering schools. This article is not written to claim superiority, it is written to explain my recent realization of continuity. What appeared to be unrelated phases of my life were, in fact, training stages of the same internal capability. Why VMT needed TDA, and why TDA never replaced VMT. In my recent medical research work, I consistently apply both viscoplastic medical theory, VMT, since January 2021, and topological data analysis, TDA, since October 2025, to the same research dataset. This choice is deliberate, not incidental. VMT is quantitative by design. It measures input stress, output strain, strain rate over time, energy accumulation, and irreversible damage. It answers questions such as how much load is applied, how fast damage accumulates, and how dangerous a trend has become. VMT treats mortality diseases, aging, and biosystem failure as time-dependent energy accumulation problems, not as isolated medical events. TDA, in contrast, is structural. It focuses on geometry, shape, distance, separation, and connectivity within data. It shows how a system deforms, where clusters separate, when pivots occur, and how stability is lost or regained. TDA is very effective at revealing turning points, regime shifts, and early structural instability. Eigenvalues in PCA, principal component analysis, or TDA, topological data analysis, are quantitative in a mathematical sense. They measure variance magnitude along dominant directions. However, they remain measurements of geometry and spread, not accumulated damage. They do not integrate over time. They do not encode irreversibility. A larger eigenvalue indicates stronger variation, not greater physiological harm. Some visual TDA tools, for example, 3D scatter diagrams and 2D radar charts with multiple variables, allow rough estimation. With consistent normalization, one can often guess direction, dominance, and approximate relative scale. This visual intuition is useful, but it is not rigorous measurement. True quantification still belongs to physics-based VMT, where energy accumulation is computed explicitly. For this reason, in my research work, the TDA model serves as validation, not as the decision engine. When both VMT and TDA independently identify the same pivot year or turning point, confidence increases. This dual agreement is not redundancy, it is cross-validation between physics-based energy, quantification and topology-based geometric structure. Why one glance became enough. After conducting nearly 1,000 similar studies across diseases, biomedical systems, and long time spans using the viscoplastic energy method, I reached a point where a single glance at my prepared data, tables of inputs and outputs often revealed the final results before calculation. At first, I did not fully understand what this meant. Only recently did I recognize it as pattern recognition. This is not guessing. It is compressed experience accumulated over more than 10 years of medical research and paper writing. It is not just numbers in a dataset. It is a visual and structural picture that forms immediately in my mind. Slopes, inflection points, accumulation trends, and instability zones become obvious before equations are applied. This phenomenon is well known in many professions. Engineers see failure before collapse. Clinicians sense deterioration before formal diagnosis. Mathematicians feel when an assumption is about to break. In my case, decades of repeated stress-strain analysis across different domains trained my brain to recognize patterns instantly. I often call this intuition, or a sixth sense. But this intuition is not mystical. It is fast internal approximation, built from long-term pattern recognition and repetition. I still calculate, I still validate, but the direction is often clear immediately. Calculation confirms what pattern recognition already suggests. Why semiconductor chip design was brain training. After my stroke in June 2025, a sudden realization occurred. For 12 years, from 1991 to 2002, I placed millions of transistors and routed many millions of electrical wires in semiconductor chips. The work resembled managing millions of spaghetti, like wires intertwined with countless nodal points, like meatballs, requiring constant awareness of flow, congestion, and failure patterns. At the time, I treated electronic engineering and AI algorithm development as purely technical professions, much like a chef following complex recipes. My Wall Street investors did not need equations or ADA jargon. They needed instant mental mapping. The spaghetti and meatballs metaphor gave them that in seconds. Only later, after my stroke, did I understand what I was really doing. A chip is a physical implementation of artificial intelligence. Transistors behave like neurons in the human brain. Wires behave like axons or neural pathways. Routing congestion mirrors neural bottlenecks. Timing failure mirrors cognitive delay. Aging causes leakage and stiffness. Overload causes rupture. Without formal training in electrical engineering or neuroscience, I could still succeed at the highest level of AI, chip design, and write neuroscience-related research articles. Because I was not thinking in circuit rules or neuron behaviors. I was thinking in systems, flow, constraints, stress distribution, and failure patterns. I was seeing the chip as a living system under load. This also explains why, after my stroke, I could write over 200 neuroscience-related research papers within 6 months. I was not learning neuroscience from scratch. I was translating an internal systems model that already existed. This is why my PhD advisor, Professor Norman Jones at MIT, initially wondered how I could reach the top of the semiconductor field, without formal credentials in electrical engineering. Later, he realized that I was recognizing patterns operating across domain boundaries, guided by dynamic plasticity and failure intuition, rather than formal discipline boundaries taught at universities. Why the stroke changed everything. The stroke did not create my abilities. Neuroplasticity removed barriers. After the stroke, speed mattered less, integration mattered more, ambition pressure dropped, clarity increased, cognitive noise was reduced. What remained was structure. Suddenly, the same internal model and pattern recognition applied everywhere. Medicine, psychology, behavior, society, politics, history, zoology, and even music and literature all revealed themselves as patterns. Each could be understood as a stress-strain flow system with energy, accumulation, thresholds, and rupture. Melody follows a rise and fall pattern. Empires rise and decline through the same dynamics of expansion, overload, and collapse. An emotional burst reflects a recognizable pattern. In borderline personality disorder, even why beef and pork are served on the human dinner table, rather than the other way around, reflects a survival pattern driven by intelligence, coordination, and adaptability, not physical strength alone. The same principle explains why 2 atomic bombs, as an expression of advanced technology, forced Japan to surrender and changed the outcome of World War II. This realization eliminated translation cost. I was no longer switching between mental or academic languages. I was expressing a single internal systems model across domains. This is why I could write over 200 papers in 6 months after my stroke in June 2025. Not because I worked harder, but because everything finally spoke the same language of pattern recognition. Even Professor Jones was surprised to see the VMT model applied so broadly. From his perspective, dynamic plasticity belonged to engineering materials. From mine, it belongs to systems, any system governed by cause and result patterns over time. Closing reflection. Looking back to 1972, the MIT psychologist at my age of 25 saw my potential without context. At that time, the data, experience, and suffering required to activate that potential did not yet exist. My past 60 years of a hard-lived life provided that context. Semiconductor design trained spatial and flow intuition. Business trained constraint trade-offs. Mortality diseases trained consequence and irreversibility. Stroke removed compartment walls. What remains is not brilliance, it is coherence. This article is not written for recognition. It is a personal reflection written to explain how a lifetime of seemingly disconnected work converged into one unified way of seeing. Pattern recognition did not suddenly appear, it finally revealed itself. Disclaimer: I write this article not for fame, but to share what I have learned, so others can understand complex systems, prevent failure, and live better lives. This content is provided for educational reference only, and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this article freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights belong to the author. Gerald C.